All right. I'm going to guess the one dislike I got on the video yesterday was somebody who had Medea Rubin and or Kayshawn Singleton in their lineup. Um, do apologize. I did manage to swap and went all in on Koger and Neptune. That paid huge because Neptune was 8% owned and ended up being one of the best plays on the slate. So I actually ended up being a 1v1 from the winner. I needed Devin Roche, and I had the Old Dominion wide receiver, Taylor. So I was close, 1v1 off. But hey, that's the way it goes. At least I got my money in where I wanted to be. So everything I had cashed. But it's one of those situations that if I was able to do this full time, we would have had, I would have recommended Neptune. I just happened to have set an alarm for 30 minutes before the game and got some information that Ruben was on the sideline in street clothes and Singleton had a cast on, and then had information that Neptune was warming up. And Koger was warming up, which immediately meant that Koger was the one. Neptune was going to be the 2 and or 3, but he plays out of the slot and gets peppered with targets. So just, one of those situations where I got the information and was able to do something with it. So very similarly today, you're going to have to follow this. I do highly suggest setting an alarm for 30 minutes before the game starts. Tonight's game starts at 8 p.m. I will still be working more than likely at that point, but I'll have an alarm set for 7:30 Central Time, and I will check my stuff and get some information on that. But Arkansas State take it on Missouri State. Missouri State, I would say, has a lot of reasons to play their guys in this game because it's their first bowl game in school history. You'll see guys play even if they're in the portal, yada yada yada. Went through something similar with JMU a 2 years ago, where we played Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl, and that was the year Signetti left. The guys that were in the portal pretty much stayed and played. So Surratt played in that game, Aiden Fisher, a lot of the guys that were transferring stayed and played in the game because it was the school's first bowl game. They wanted to see it through and all that stuff. So I think you do end up seeing a lot of the Missouri State guys play. Most of them aren't transferring up at all. Some of them have already played in bowl games, such as Shamari Lawrence. The only question mark for me, and I'm going to kind of avoid him because of it, is Tristan Gardner. He is a freshman who played pretty well for Missouri State. Missouri State chucks it around the yard, and he is in the portal. So I would expect him to not play because he's trying to transfer up and he has 3 more seasons. I don't think he's too concerned with it. So I would expect him to be out for this game. He's the one guy that I do expect to be out. Otherwise, I think like Shamari Lawrence is going to play because he's, not he was formerly of FIU and has kind of transferred around a little bit. So he's going to end up playing, and they throw the ball a lot. I'd expect 30 plus pass attempts in this one. Jacob Clark got hurt in this Western Kentucky game. So I think you see them throw the ball for 280 plus, more than likely, probably a couple scores. There is no rushing upside out of Jacob Clark. He's kind of a college version of Matthew Stafford, we'd call it. Not really any rushing upside. He's going to throw the ball for about 280, 300. It depends how many times he finds the end zone as to how many points he scores today. I would say I'm not super interested in him as a captain necessarily, but I'm pretty interested in him in the flex positions, no doubt about it. Now, I will be interested a lot in his wide receivers. I do think Arkansas State is a much better team, given the relative strengths of the conferences between Conference USA and the Fun Belt. And I think that Rayner and Rucker are very important pieces in this game. But let's finish up with the Missouri State talk. So Missouri State is somewhat predictable. Let's just look at them. Shamari Lawrence is your top back. He's going to get most of the work at the running back position. Green is going to come on as kind of like a third down, change of pace back. I'm not interested in him necessarily. I would prefer to play them through the wide receivers. They have a rotation of 5 to 6 guys that come in, including the tight end. Tight end, very cheap in this spot. Top option at wide receiver is going to be Jamari Lawrence. That's my favorite guy to play from on the offensive side. And I believe because of the Tristan Gardner thing, with him likely being out, you're going to see a condensed rotation at the wide receiver position. Rennell Johnson's meh. I'm not super interested. He had a little nice 3-game stretch in here, but otherwise has been largely ineffective. So I would be out there. He's a little more expensive than I would like as well. Robinson, it would be the first play I like. Second guy out of Missouri State from the wide receiver position is going to be some combination of Dash Luke, who's going to be on the field a good bit, Makai Cope, who's going to be on the field a good bit, and Blackstrain. So preference there is to go to Robinson. I'm going to end up with just having Robinson in each team personally. I think he's going to be in the top option. He'll soak up a little bit of Gardner's volume, and then the rest of it gets spread between these 3. They'll rotate in and out of the lineup, and you'll kind of see a little mix there. Value-wise on the Missouri State side, Jerron Askren, he's their tight end. He gets a good, decent amount of work. It's a pretty touchdown dependent as to how he ends up scoring. But, nice 75-yard play here against Louisiana Tech. He kind of broke loose, broken coverage, and scored. So he does have a little bit of big play upside, but I wouldn't count on that. But if you need a punt, I will have an Askren lineup. You'll see it in a bit. So I'm largely ignoring kickers in these bowl games unless I'm just kind of stuck in that spot. But there is some upside across the board here. So Arkansas State-wise, Rayner and Rucker have been together for a long time at this point. Rucker is one of the better G5 wide receivers, in my opinion. I would not be surprised if they try to get him to 1,000 yards in this spot, and he just gets fed. 8 catches is not out. 8 to 10 catches would not be out of the realm of possibility, in my opinion. We've seen Rucker. He's in year 6 at this point. The kid is going to get peppered. He's a senior. I really do expect him to just get peppered. So Rayner and Rucker are locks for me on this slate because I know they'll play. If Rayner was transferring, he would have already done it by now. He has rushing upside. His passing floor is not the same as Jacob Clark necessarily, but he has a lot more rushing capability. So while Clark, I'm only going to use in utility spots, Rayner, I'm going to have as a captain in 2 out of my 3, and then Rucker's going to be my other captain because of the off chance that he goes 8 for 140 and 2, which he very well could. I think 20 to 30 points for Rucker would not shock me. I really do think they try to get him to 1,000. I would expect, I don't see how they might not go for 2 touchdowns in this spot as well in his final game. He's been at Arkansas State for a long time now. He's kind of a staple for the program. I believe he went to South Carolina at one point and then came back, but kind of a Sia Bangura type situation there. So he's the very clear number 1. Chauncey Cobb is the very clear number 2. Very similar catch volume to Rucker. He's just not finding the end zone. He's more of a possession wideout for them, move the chains type guy. I do think Rayner, Rucker, he could sustain any of those two. And then the number 3 for me is going to be Fortenberry. As far as the tight end goes, he's very cheap as well. So you're able to get good value on Fortenberry in this spot. I think he's a good value play, similar to Askren for Missouri State. And then Hunter Summers is their number 3 wide receiver, I would call it. I would prefer Rucker or Cobb. I think Summers ends up being the odd man out in this spot, and he's priced up too much for me to want to play him. Running back wise, Kenyon Clay is your top back. They're better used out of the backfield. These running backs are. He's not a particularly efficient runner. You can see it. 3 yards a carry, 2 yards, 2 yards, 2 yards. He's not explosive. He doesn't break long runs. Rayner gets used around the goal line in the ground game. I'm not really interested in the running backs in this spot. Spencer, very similarly, gets used out of the backfield. Not exactly an explosive runner. I'd prefer Spencer to Clay probably, but it's 6.5 dozen another. I don't like any of them. And it's a very concentrated target tree, so it's very easy to go with the pass game. So out the gate, I'm going to show both Rayner teams that I've managed to put together. Rayner with Rucker, Fortenberry, and Cobb. That gives me the top 3 targets that I prefer in the pass game for the Arkansas State side with Rayner. So I get all of his passing touchdown production and his rushing touchdown upside from him in this spot. And then on the other side, I get the top target for Missouri State in what I think is going to be somewhat of a more concentrated target tree with no Tristan Gardner, and then Shamari Lawrence, who is probably in his last game. He'll be the guy who's going to tote the rock on the ground. He will catch a couple passes here and there. It's not necessarily his strength, but he has good volume. So you're kind of playing through they can't throw the ball as much. They're trying to be balanced. Shamari Lawrence gets the work, yada, yada, yada. So I do really like this team, and I'm in on it. The other way to play Rayner for me is going to be through a Jacob Clark backfill. So Rayner with Clark, and I get the top, what I would consider 2 of the better pass catching options for them in Askren and Robinson with Clark, and Rucker and Fortenberry with Rayner. Now, obviously, I would prefer if I could go Fortenberry to Cobb. I can't. It's 200 off, which means that's probably the nuts. And then otherwise, you've got Askren, and then I would prefer it to be Dash Luke more than likely, but I can't get there. And then I'm still debating whether I would prefer to go Askren or Blackstrain or Cope. I'm not certain on that. Projections would say Blackstrain and Cope are worse plays than Askren. Volume would say that, but that's with Tristan Gardner in the lineup. So I'm not certain on that end. Where do the the projected volume of 3 catches and 40 yards go from Gardner? Does it go to Luke? Does it go to Cope? Does it go to Blackstrain? Does it go to Jamari Robinson, and then he goes from 5 catches to 6-7 catches and 80 yards instead of 60? Does Askren get another catch or 2 and be over 40? That's the question, right? Overall projection wise, it leans towards Robinson and Askren being the beneficiaries. So I'm going to prefer to play it through that. I don't necessarily love playing both tight ends. I really wish I could get Cobb over Fortenberry. It's 200 off, and that's rather annoying when it comes to that. So it's kind of where you get stuck there. But that's the way I'm going to end up playing that. And then Rucker wise, I do actually like the Rucker team. That's why I want to play it. I do think there's viability. I think playing 2 Rucker teams isn't the worst idea either. Um, so I've got a Rucker, Rayner, Robinson, Clark, Cobb, Askren team. Um, Once again, that gets me. So the team that I was trying to play, which is Rucker, Cobb, Rayner, it gets me that. So basically, it's you're banking on Rucker to outscore Rayner or to score with him, and then Cobb to be the difference maker in this one over the Fortenberry thing. Otherwise, you're looking at, let's see, Askren. So it gives you the same question mark of, do you prefer Askren, Cope, or Blackstrain? I'm still leaning Askren in this spot, but it's going to be a game time call on that end. And then the other way, which I'm leaning towards that, the other way is to go with a Shamari Lawrence spot. Now you can't play the Arkansas State kicker, so you're kind of stuck right there. Do you want to play Dash Luke at that point? I don't think that's the worst play. I think you could also go Fortenberry, but now you're spreading too much. So if you go Fortenberry here, projection-wise, it's going to say this is the best way to play it. More than likely, if you were going to play it this way with Shamari Lawrence. But playing it this way, how does Fortenberry Cobb get there while Rucker is the elite option? That's why I don't really want to play the 3 pass catchers. If I was going to do this, I probably would go Dash Luke. Just because I think the volume is more likely to be there for Dash Luke, given we've seen a 5 for 80, a 9 for 110, a 3 for 70, 5 for 73. So if I was switching it and saying I wanted to go away from Jacob Clark in this spot, I would go Lawrence with Luke and Robinson. But if Luke and Robinson get there, then Clark probably needs to get there. So I think that makes it difficult. So I would prefer to go Clark, play it through the pass game, and then you've got to decide on, do you think there's upside in Blackstrain? Do you think there's upside in Cope? Both of them are FBS or high-end transfer down guys that likely see more volume in this spot. I'm leaning on Askren just solely based on what volume I've seen lately and how that feels, right? I like these 2 games, the 3 for 54 and the 3 for 37. I think he's more of a viable option around the goal line. So that gives me a little bit more upside there. So yeah, that's we're looking at that. I do want to go over. So we've got I want to go over some transfer news because I actually do have some stuff here. One thing I do want to talk about too is Tulane and the Blake Baker situation. So I have it on good authority that Blake Baker was accepting that job at Tulane. He was not staying at LSU. The transfer portal stuff and how they are handling that at Tulane, he ended up turning down the job after he got some information from one of the other candidates about how stringent their portal stuff is and what they will accept, won't accept, yada, yada. That ended up changing things. There was supposed to be some LSU staff members and a bunch of LSU players, not like high-end ones, obviously, that were going to Tulane with him, but don't think that's going to happen. So, all right, this is getting interesting. So I've kind of started trying to break down what the destinations are and what's still open and where people could land. This is actually starting to get good. So Mestamaker, I think, is going to Oklahoma State. I don't think there's any doubt about it. He's going to follow his coach. he's going to go there. I'm pretty confident in that one right there. Now, Aaron Philo is going to Florida. So reports are that Summerall had a meeting with Lagway, kind of tested Lagway, and Lagway pretty much failed that test and ended up quitting and leaving, which put into question his, how much he wants it. But Philo is going to end up going with Buster Faulkner from Georgia Tech to Florida and likely being the starter, which, Faulkner's going to know him best because he's worked with him for 2 years now. I think Philo ends up starting at Georgia Tech. I think Mestamaker ends up being at Oklahoma State. Feel pretty good about those two. At this point. Now, the big stuff going on is Sorsby, it seems like, is going to end up at Texas Tech with his girlfriend. Obviously, we just saw the picture of her, the volleyball player, going to Texas Tech, she transferred from Cincinnati to Texas Tech. Sorsby from Lake Dallas, Texas, natural ties, right? I do think Texas Tech has the pick of the litter between Sorsby and Raiola, mainly because he just wants to follow Mahomes, yada, yada, yada. But I do think Sorsby is likely to end up at Texas Tech. That seems to be the likely answer at the moment. And then that domino is landing Raiola. There's a little smoke with him going to Louisville with Jeff Brom and the Brom brothers. I think that is likely to end up happening. So now we're in those, 2, 3, and 4 are all covered up. And that fills in the Louisville spot, which it seems they're just going to take transfers every year now. Texas Tech, you're going to have Will Hammond coming back with Sorsby. So that makes things quite interesting. And now the Florida spot's going to be filled. The Oklahoma State spot's going to be filled. Now the key spots that are open to me, although there's quite a few more, I'm sure, that I'm not factoring in yet, but I'm just thinking about the big ones, is LSU's obviously open. Where does Lane turn? Does Lane be able to turn? Does he go back to Ole Miss, grab one of those guys once they're out of the playoff? It's possible. I think they do make a run. I think the apple of everybody's eye is Sam Levitt, in my opinion. But I think he's the apple of everybody's eye. So LSU, Indiana, and Miami and Auburn are the 4 big jobs that are open. I say Auburn because I think Auburn might shell out a ton of money for a quarterback, given how poor their quarterback play's been lately. I still think Byron Brown's in play to move. He hasn't actually announced anything. He was on the coaching staff yesterday, kind of running that offense. Now, granted, that offense was terrible yesterday. It was Spam, Koger, and Neptune. I still think Koger ends up being available as well. But I think we're going to see a lot of movement from that South Florida offense this year. Does Byron Brown go to Auburn and run the offense? I think that's the most logical way for them to handle that. You're probably going to be able to get away with paying him less if you're going to end up. I really do think that this shows his Levitt's NIL value at $2 million. I really think you're going to see him get 4 to 5 from Miami, more than likely. I think Levitt goes to Miami. That just feels like the most likely. I mean, the kid just looks Miami. He's got Miami. If the Cavender twins were still there, he'd be dating the one that's not married. That just screams that. That's got Beck, Levitt, Cavender twin. It just makes complete sense. But I think he's going to have a fight on his hands. Indiana's going to bring in a guy more than likely. I do think Lagway's kind of the consolation prize in this situation. And then it's trying to figure out your secondaries. So Indiana's going to have to grab a guy more than likely. I think they reach into the portal. Then you've got the Vandy, Nebraska, Georgia Tech spots. Minchie kind of feels like a Vandy, Georgia Tech guy. I think Vandy makes a ton of sense as a Pavia replacement to go Minchie. Minchie's got a similar athletic profile. I do like Minchie. Minchie could very well be the guy that's the underrated pickup from the portal this year. Because if you look at like Levitt's the best one because he's the most productive. He's played the best. You feel the best about him. He's what you hope Minchie is. Mestamaker, he's just, he's a system guy. He fits the system. You just put him in there. Sorsby is fine, but he's like a poor man's Levitt. He runs fairly well, throws okay. He's going to be fine. He's going to be able to carry, do enough. But he's a Big 12 prototypical quarterback. Nothing crazy. Raiola and Lagway kind of fit in this. We were ballyhooed prospects who moderately failed. And I don't know that you could say, hey, they are like everybody's going to say they're bounce back candidates because they're moving. Oh, they're going to be better now that they've moved, yada, yada, yada. There is the possibility that they just suck. You know what I mean? There is the possibility that they were rated too highly and they just aren't good. Because 99% of quarterbacks who are extremely good aren't moving unless they're moving up, guys. They're not going to move around. You're not going to see like Carson Beck, for everything he is an extremely flawed player. So, and he was a winner at Georgia. That's not to say anything. But Georgia knew he was a flawed player, and that's why they were willing to move on. Big programs don't move on from guys if they're the guy. So I think they're flawed options. They're going to get big jobs, but it's going to kind of be at the expense of once Levitt decides where he wants to go, unless Raiola goes to Louisville, which he makes a ton of sense there. He'd fit the system extremely well. Brom's a great coach. It'd be as good of a spot as he could land in. I do think Minchie has the most upside of the bunch because we haven't seen what it is. We kind of know what Levitt is. We don't know what Minchie is yet, technically speaking. He has that similar, I'm the backup. I've been a backup, but I don't quite know what he is. I think Colton Josephs feels very John Materi, and he's a backup option as well for teams. Now, what I'm interested in personally is there's some big boys in the portal at wide receiver. I'm going to keep on my priors in saying, I mean, there's just a ton of guys. I'm super interested where they land. Omarion Miller went in. I projected that. That was a good bet on my end. Omarion Miller is now in the portal. I think he vaults to number 1 as the best portal prospect for the wide receiver position for me. Omarion Miller at Colorado playing in that awful offense was actually extremely good. Nick Marsh is 2. I still think Jackson Harris or Jace Brown is 3. I do like Jackson Harris a ton. I'll be interested to see where they land. I just wanted to be able to talk about Omarion Miller for a minute. And I think Aiden Mizell is extremely interesting. Scudero, to Brian's point, Brian's extremely interested where he lands. I think he fits beautifully in like a Texas Tech as a slot option for them. So, I think there's a lot to come. Micah Mays at Wake Forest. Like there's just so much. Corey Milner from UAB. He's got a lot of off-field issues, but extremely talented player. So it's going to be fun to be able to look at this stuff and see where some of these guys land. You got Cam Davis from Florida State at running back who now has gone in. So this stuff's going to continue to evolve, and we're going to continue to keep an eye on it and talk about it because ultimately this is the type of stuff that we need to keep up with at the end of the year. So we kind of have our initial feelings on where we're going into next year. Now that, it's very hard. It used to be college wise, you could just drop everything. Once the season ends, you just drop it. You pick back up where you left off in July, and you kind of knew exactly where everybody was. You gotten to the point now where you've got to follow where these guys are going, figure out what your feeling is going to be on how they fit with each other, and go from there. Like, I wouldn't particularly love a Nick Marsh if, let's say, I think Texas Tech's in the market for 2 to 3 wide receivers. But, like, let's just say Aaron Philo at Florida. I mean, I'd be interested to see, does Dallas Wilson enter the portal? How do I feel about a Buster Faulkner offense being able to support some of these high end weapons? Like, I would rather Aiden Mizell go in the portal. I still think we're waiting to see, but you're going to see Jaden Baugh leave potentially and go to Texas. What does that do? Like, where does Florida land on the running back situation? That is a run-based offense. It's going to have a lot of carries, a lot of pass attempts to the running back. It utilizes the running back extremely well in that offense. So it's a lot to play out, but I think keeping an eye on all this stuff and trying to figure out where these pieces fit is going to be extremely important to how good we're going to do early in the season. I know that I'm going to try to keep up with it more than I did a year ago. Like, I was on it a year ago, but I want to be more invested now that I'm actually kind of way more in. At this point, I haven't split my attention between NFL and college. It's all college all the time at this point. So, but yeah, so another bowl game today. We will have Live Before Lock tomorrow because the Kennesaw State Western Michigan game starts at 10 a.m. Central. So we're going to be live right up to it, basically. I would go live at 8:30, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. And we'll be able to talk about that 3-game slate. Nice to be able to get a 3-gamer on the books. I can't stand Showdown. It's just not my thing. I'm not extremely good at it. But there's going to be a lot. You're going to have to keep an eye all the way through the day because you got a 10 a.m., an 11 Eastern start. You got a 2:30 Eastern start, and you got an 8 p.m. Eastern start. So keeping an eye on all of these guys and those games. The nice part is that the CFP game, you kind of know who's playing. We can feel good about that. I will have a Showdown lineup for that CFP game, although I think it's going to go under and it's going to be an extremely low scoring game. Otherwise, though, we're going to end up building out a single entry for that game. And then Saturday, we got the big 3 games. We'll have some single entry stuff for that. I'm probably going to avoid the big contest, the nonsense $25, $30, whatever the heck it is contest, because it's nowhere near as viable to play on a short slate, because at 150 entry max, it's literally these guys that are playing 3K a week can hit every permutation, and I just can't. So I'd rather play single entry on that stuff and be a little bit more cautious with it. So good luck to everybody today. Hopefully eventually I'll be able to be live right before lock every day in the future, and you wouldn't have necessarily missed the Medea Rubin out news if you did miss it, and the Kayshawn Singleton news if you did miss it. I know I felt pretty good about them yesterday, but obviously news breaks and Singleton's in a cast and Rubin's in street clothes, and then I swapped to Neptune and Koger exclusively. So, like I said, you've got to pay attention to that stuff. And optimally, I'd be able to just sit here and tell y'all that I saw it. But, I got burned by the Cam Cook thing the day before. Nobody really knew. So we'll see. That's bowl season for you. All right, that's just kind of how it goes. You got to pay a little extra attention. I remember on Christmas Eve last year, I was sweating the quarterback who was going to start for, I don't remember who. I think San Jose State was in that game. I don't remember who the other team was, but I was sweating who was starting in the game. So that's just kind of how it goes, Miles Coleman, 100 plus yards. I'll never forget it. But good luck to everybody today. Keep an eye on those lineups. I could